the key has been how you develop a safe space to have a conversation. That's your first challenge. And a lot of people don't realise what we're also doing is that in the backdrop of that is probably more important than most things is that is the nation building, is the peace building with the Aboriginal groups as well. We made a courageous attempt to and steps to look at all the sort of complexities of the challenges, I guess, that small communities like Bourke are, face with on a day-to-day basis. So, but look, having said that, is that I think the key to it is that we're bringing the Aboriginal community along as part of that whole process, and through that we're building an empowerment framework, and what comes with empowerment is responsibility, and so for some that's new, and for some it's not new because we've been in this space for a very, extremely long time, and but with the lack of and limited access to resources that really dictated what we can do and what we can't do. So we're changing that.
Once we had that, I suppose, permission and also request from the community of Bourke, Mick and I had a conversation that we realised this was really something that was happening. We kind of looked at each other at the airport and said, all right, this is real. So we organised a roundtable at the Human Rights Commission, and we invited potential philanthropists, organisations that had long working relationships with Bourke, like Glenlease, other corporates, KPMG, statisticians, ABS, Boxer, the Aboriginal Legal Service. Obviously, this was all led by community members from Bourke. So Alistair was there with Mick Williams, an Aboriginal police officer in Bourke at the time. And at the end of that day, everyone who was sitting at that table said they wanted in. They wanted to support the initiative.
The meeting at the Australian Human Rights Commission meeting was significant because there was an enormous number of people there. So there was an enormous amount of support to come and listen, to understand what justice reinvestment's about and how we could help. And I think having the mixture of people in the room, having corporate organisations, philanthropists, NGOs, government all sitting in the room together gave us hope that we could do things a little bit differently. And I thought that was a very exciting way because there was a feeling in that room that we needed to change, we needed to break the mould, we needed to do things differently. So I thought that was a very exciting meeting and we were so glad to be a part of it.
We had to put in funding applications, informal funding applications, and that took a while, This was all very new to us. We had always thought of ourselves as an advocacy organisation, and suddenly we were putting in funding applications into philanthropists that we'd never worked with before. So we took some time in preparing those applications.
The key thing that really attracted us to the Maranguka Justice Reinvestment Initiative was that strong community vision and lead. We knew that was essential, and that without that community leadership and ownership, really, I think, that the work will not be successful at the end of the day. And that doesn't happen magically. That really needs nurturing and support and resourcing. And it also needs to work at the timeframes of the community and build from the strengths that they have. So that's a really different kind of way of working where you need to be very flexible, responsive, you need to listen well, not come in with preordained visions that you hold yourself.
The other key agency that Alistair really effectively engaged with was the Human Rights Commission, with Megan and with Mick coming out and having those really nuanced community conversations in big forums, but doing it in a really respectful way and getting, again, very good perspectives on what the priorities from community were and from young people through a whole lot of different cohorts. So I think that constant reaching out and building and building and building a more nuanced picture has given a lot of credibility as well.
So certainly in the early days of the Maranguka program, there was a lot of stakeholder engagement, and I know that that can be a bit of a cliche, but it was genuine engagement, and it was well structured, and it gave all the voices in the community a choice to attend meetings and be present. Not everyone did, and that's still a challenge for us.
The community made it very clear that they wanted to prioritise what was happening with children and young people, and particularly to create pathways away from criminal justice and prison systems. And it was a pretty powerful day. At the end of the day, the young people stood up at in the front of the hall to share what their vision for Burke would be, and a lot of that was around it being a more interesting place for them, having more activities, more to do. And it was an emotional day, because at the end of that day, one of the elders stood up and said, with tears in her eyes, you know, I've been coming to these sorts of meetings for 30 years and I've never heard a young person stand up and tell me what they think.
So Collaboration for Impact plays a role in Burke, where we walk alongside Alistair and the community leaders and the backbone team, and help them think through how to design the change process. So that might be from a community engagement point of view. We do a lot of the facilitation of when the community comes together. We take up the neutral facilitation role. So, for example, we worked with the backbone team to design a training program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to host data-based community conversations.
The Safe, Smart, Strong strategy came about because we knew we needed data, and we needed real-time data, not dated stuff, but localised real-time data. And we wanted to put it in such a way that it represented a life in Burke. So what's the lived experience in Burke for everything from pre-birth and 0 all the way through to 25 years old. So we knew we needed to look at factors like housing, health, education, and a whole other range, but then also how that impacted how people get incarcerated. So we also did the same data showing that how people in Burke were actually getting mixed up with the law or getting in trouble, getting incarcerated. And we needed to put it in a way that was palatable and easy to understand for the community. So we came up with an infographic style pamphlet. So it was really great. It was breakthrough in itself, just presenting information in that way. But also understanding what's the reality here, because when you have a lot of different service organisations, you have a lot of funding, you've got fly-in, fly-out consultation from government, it's very difficult for communities to understand the real story. So having an infographic and having the data there, understanding what programs were there, what was funded, what people used, what they liked, what gaps were there, was really palatable and able to be, socialised with the community. And then that data enabled them to make the decisions about their priorities and where to start.
The bureaucratic data, if you like, was just the starting point or the springboard for community data conversations. So there was a process that took place that trained up local people to hold those conversations in the community, and they could have happened down in the village or in an office space or at a kitchen table, but about 60 people took part in those community data conversations, and those conversations were recorded and summarised and themed.
My role in the community conversations, I was trained first with 14 other service providers that were handpicked and selected. They were selected because they were seen to have good connection and communication with community members of Burke. We were all trained to have these community conversations based around the snapshot, based around the data, just relevant to Burke only. And that's what we did. We went out and had community conversations.
Positioning how important this was, the validity of it coming from a community voice, what the community saw it would enable as far as actually getting very real and raw conversations into that data collection piece. And I think it's a very new concept for a lot of people and for a lot of bureaucrats as well, me being one of them. But I think understanding you know, those real conversations are based so inherently on trust and understanding and a connection and an existing relationship, and that's the key to having Aboriginal people from Bourke who are working with the community who already have those things in place to be able to bring out that really richness of data and richness of experience and bring that into the picture and the data piece.
In terms of the importance of data in how we're doing business, that was crucial, because as we know with any collective impact type approach, you know, there really needs to be some sense of what are we basing our programs on, where the evidence is coming from, and how do we evaluate our performance. So
it was important in those early stages to sustain that momentum for change in Bourke. But we saw some really good anecdotal stories come out of that about what happens when the school comes in and actually plays a part in, in supporting a person at that point. So someone who completely alienated themselves from the school system, what does it take to reintegrate them back into that system? And other players, youth services, justice agencies, they all started coming together to work out solutions for people. It didn't take too long with something like the Warrant Clinic for the practice to shift. So Bourke went from being somewhere where there were a lot of warrants being issued from that court to a court where there were very few.